welcome back to Zanelle's Teacher Apple. Today we are going to talk about the difference between heterogeneous groups and homogeneous groups. As you can see, I'm in another setting today and it's pretty loud because there's recess going on outside, but I just thought it'd be a good idea to put in this quick intro to what heterogeneous and homogeneous groups are and why teachers may be interested in using them in their classroom. While grouping in the classroom may be daunting, it's a good idea to always switch up your grouping and keep things interesting and engaging for our students. Some teachers might not be comfortable with classifying their students, or they're just not comfortable with running groups and having students work together in different groups and figuring out how to manage that. You can check out my last video where I do talk about creating small groups to help you if you need help in that area. But in order to form groups, teachers have to understand the two different type of groups that can be used in the classroom, and that is, like I said before, heterogeneous groups and homogeneous groups. So let's get into what those groups are. So the first group that I'm going to talk about are heterogeneous groups. These groups are groups with students that have a mixed ability level, meaning that they all do not perform at the same level. And it's easy to get this information by using data in your classroom on a daily basis or through standardized testing and just looking through your data and seeing where students are. Heterogeneous groups are formed for several different reasons. One might be just to push students to a different level, or simply to have students that are already at a certain level or that are proficient or at a mastery level build some autonomy where they're able to now take on a leadership role. These groups are made up of students at different ability levels, so that might be reading level, math level. Either way, they're like mixed groups, so students aren't learning at the same level. And what makes these groups effective is that it gives each student at a different level some type of benefit, something that they can grow from. So whether or not you form the group to push students to a certain level, or to students that are already at a certain level to push them further, these type of groups have advantages. Some of these advantages include struggling students. They are able to learn from other students, students that aren't struggling, students that understand the concept, and they are able to kind of learn from them as they are doing an activity. Also, students who are working at a proficient level, they have the opportunity to build some autonomy by working with students that aren't at the same level with them, or even students that are above a level that then they are on. They're able to build autonomy because they can kind of step out and add in their input when it comes to the activity or the task that students are working on. Another advantage is that groups can be engaging as students learn from each other. So whether they are proficient or at a mastery level, students are able to step up into that leadership role, which is what ideally the purpose of a group setting. Now, there are some disadvantages when it comes to heterogeneous groups. One of them being that maybe struggling students, they might shy away and they're not as comfortable because they know that they're in a group with higher performing students. Another might be the students that are at that mastery level. Sometimes they feel like that they're the ones doing all the work and the other students aren't participating, and they know that they're kind of at a higher level than the other kids in the group. Another disadvantage is that some struggling students, depending on their work ethic, they just might let the students that have the ability to do the work do all of the work. Now, these disadvantages are all dependent on your students and the type of classroom that you run and the expectations that you set before you start your groups. So it is up to the teacher to let students know what exactly is expected as students work together in these groups. So by setting strong expectations and having a strong follow through throughout the group activity will ensure that some of these disadvantages are ceased and that they just don't happen. But like I said, it's up to the teacher, and it does take some time to kind of figure out what groups will work and what groups don't work. And if something doesn't work, then that's okay. Hi, scene change. So the next type of grouping I want to talk about are homogeneous groups. So in contrast to heterogeneous groups, these groups have students that are all at the same ability level. So that means that based on your data, you can kind of place students that work at the same level into the same group, meaning they are learning at the same pace, whether they're struggling students, they're students that are proficient, and they're on grade level where they need to be, or students who have already mastered grade level skills and who are ready to be pushed to the next level. So everyone in the group is capable of mastering whatever task you have set forth for the group and able to complete those tasks successfully just because they're all working at the same level. Some of the advantages to having homogeneous groups running in your classroom are that you are able to differentiate your instruction and kind of assign each group skills that they need to work on based on their ability level. So for example, if you have a group of struggling students who are all struggling in the same concept, then when you do your grouping, you can have those students work on that skill or that concept that they all have trouble in. And you can also have it where you are working with those students in a group and have your other groups who are students that have already mastered that skill, or students who can work independently, do tasks on their own, who already have that autonomy level, and that kind of saves you time to work with struggling students. Another advantage to homogeneous groups are that students are able to collaborate and they are working together towards the same task because they have the same learning ability. So they're able to complete those tasks successfully and feel good about themselves at the same time, because these tasks are typically things that they're not going to really struggle in, but things that they are capable of doing on their own, even if they weren't with the group. Homogeneous groups really promote healthy discussion just because students are working at that same level with other students, and they typically see things eye to eye, they typically struggle in the same areas, and they're typically able to help each other out in the same area. So this is very healthy grouping to have in your classroom when it comes to making sure students' needs are met. Teachers are able to plan effectively because you're just planning for that group, as opposed to heterogeneous where you kind of have to plan the task and then plan who's going to complete each task in each group. Whereas homogeneous groups, you could just give everyone in that group the task that you want that group to work on. While there are some advantages, there are some disadvantages, like everything else in life, to having homogeneous groups. For example, in the higher groups where you have students that are above mastery level, or students that are typically gifted, there might be too many chiefs in the group that want to run everything, or there might be too many leaders in the group and they want to just there's too many people that are calling the shots. There's too many people that want to be in control and be the leader of the group, and this might cause some groups to kind of clash. As a teacher, it's important that you kind of strategically plan your groups in a way where you have activities that your other groups can do successfully and independently while you take the time to work with your struggling homogeneous groups. That way your classroom is running efficiently and you you don't have to be in 5 different places at one time. So now that you know about homogeneous and heterogeneous groups and what the differences are, you might be thinking, okay, what type of grouping should I use in my classroom? When should I use these types of grouping? And how do I know what type of grouping to actually use in the classroom? And my answer to that is basically it depends on your students, and it depends on the instruction, and it depends on the outcome that you want to have at the end of your lesson. So most importantly, you have to know your students, and you have to know what your outcome, what the overall goal is in the end. And then you could kind of work your way backwards to see how you can incorporate groups in order to reach that end goal. So when it comes to student behavior, you have to know, okay, what students can work together and what students absolutely cannot, regardless of ability level. And again, that goes back to knowing your students and knowing their strengths and weaknesses when it comes to academics and when it comes to overall behavior. We have to teach our students how to work with everybody. Students have to know that you're not always going to get along with people, but you have to learn how to respect people and work with people, regardless of how you feel about them. And that life lesson kind of starts now, and it starts with us, because we have the power to make sure our students do learn how to work together effectively and healthy, regardless of whether or not they are friends or how they feel about each other. They still have to learn how to collaborate and be a team when necessary. An effective teacher knows the demographics of her classroom. An effective teacher knows what's going to work and what isn't going to work for their classroom. You have to know your students, and you have to know their capabilities. You might have a classroom that's made up of students that are struggling at grade level, and you only have a few students that have mastered most of the skills that you are teaching. Or it may be the opposite. You might have a classroom where you have a majority of students who are able to build that autonomy and work at an independent pace, which leaves you time to work with the students that can't. But knowing what the demographics are and the structure of your classroom, which can vary each year, is going to help you structure your heterogeneous or homogeneous groups more effectively. You have to learn how to be adaptable, and you have to be ready to change and switch things at any time, because at the end of the day, we have to adapt to our students, and we have to adapt to their learning and their ability level so that we can push them to that next level. And we're only going to do that if we know and understand our students. How can we push them? What do we know about them? What do they need to know before we just start planning things and making things and getting things together? Because if we're not planning, then it's not going to work. If we're not creating groups in a way that is going to be effective and proficient for them, then it's not going to work. So basically, the overall goal of the type of grouping that you are trying to do, whether it's homogeneous or heterogeneous, is going to depend on the lesson. So what is the outcome? I love to switch it up. Both groups work well in my classroom as long as I know my students, and as long as the instruction and the skill and the focus aligns with what I have planned. So you can absolutely switch it up at any time. It depends on you and what's going to work for your classroom and ultimately for your students. But having a variety of grouping in your classroom is only going to bring students in, make them more engaging and excited to learn, and it also switches up the instruction for you so you don't feel like you're always doing the same thing. What type of grouping do you do in your classroom? What are some things that you're putting into place to make sure that you have students in the right group, whether it's a heterogeneous group or a homogeneous group? Please share your comments below, like, subscribe. We would love to hear from you. From my teacher apple to yours.